Hi, I'm Representative Jessica Giannino, and we're here for another View from the Hill. Today, I'm joined by Lieutenant Don Bossi from the Massachusetts State Police. Lieutenant Bossi is the station commander for the Revere Barracks, and I'm really excited to talk to him today about your job and how you got here and everything you do for the community.
Well, thank you. I appreciate you having me, Jessica, and I'm very excited about the opportunity to sit down not only in a public format, but with a friend.
Well, we're really excited to have you here, and I'm more excited because you're a resident of the 16th Suffolk District, so to have someone that is such a part of the community, but also someone that's a valued member of this community is really important to us.
Well, thank you, and thank you for your representation.
Awesome. So I think to get to where we are, let's go back. So let's start from the beginning. So I want to know about you, Lieutenant. So tell me about how you got to where you are today and what got you into law enforcement.
So I've always been a member or a resident of the 16th Suffolk District, having been born and raised and grown up in East Boston. And when I was growing up, all of my older relatives that grew up in East Boston moved out to Revere, but being the youngest of all, by the time I was growing up, Revere was full, so I wound up in Saugus. Although with the development nowadays, you wouldn't know that Revere was full.
Right.
But I grew up in the area. I've always lived around here. I was fortunate enough to go to school at Don Bosco High School, and R.I.P. Don Bosco. It has since closed, but a private school in Boston.
Mm-hmm.
And then the only member of my family to go on to college.
Wow.
So I went to St. Leo College, small college, just north of Tampa in Florida. Came back to my roots where I knew I always wanted to be, and 2 years after graduation, I was very fortunate to get the call to be a Mass State Trooper. So how I got to where I wanted to be, I've known pretty much my entire life that I wanted to be a Mass State Trooper, not just a police officer. This was my goal, and which is part of why I went to college in Florida, because my goal was to be a Mass State Trooper, and I knew winters here were unrelenting. So I figured for 4 years, maybe I can get out of the winter. But I took the test to be a state trooper in, I'm going to date myself here, but in 1987, between my freshman and sophomore years, I actually flew home. I drove down to Florida, found an apartment off campus, flew home, took the test, and then flew back to start my sophomore year. And one class was hired, and then the Governor Dukakis, put a hiring freeze on, which lasted from, I think, 1987 until it was lifted the end of 1991. And I got a call saying, hey, are you still interested? And I thought, yes, yes, I am. Thank you for waiting. And then in June of 1992, June 16th of 1992, I started the State Police Academy. So I got a couple of years of life experience, which I think definitely benefited me. And here I am today.
That's awesome. Now, did you study criminal justice in school, or what was your background? Because I know for me, being a state rep, a lot of people think I majored in political science. I didn't. My background's in English, so I think it's interesting sometimes to find out how those traditional pathways might not always be as traditional as we think. And I always find it interesting. So, my dad was a police officer. He went to Salem State, studied criminal justice. Similar to you, got hired around the same time, dealt with some of those same things with the hiring freeze and everything that was happening. Yeah. And it's interesting how history kind of repeats itself. We go through similar cycles with the test and with different things that have happened since you've been on to now. But I'm curious, so did you study criminal justice and know that was what you wanted to do, or?
I did. I knew this is where I wanted to go.
That's awesome.
My goal was to be a Mass State Trooper, so I studied criminology. I like everybody in life, I sort of had a backup plan.
Yeah.
That if that didn't work out, I'd studied electricity at Don Bosco. So I had done some hours as an apprentice, and that was always on the table. But I was working towards this goal. So I fortunately, from the beginning, and when it comes to education, just like you and your father, I'm also a Salem State alum.
Woohoo!
Having graduated in 1990 from St. Leo, I decided to take a slight hiatus. I think they call them a gap year.
Yep.
It took about 20 gap years. I went back for my master's at Salem State in 2011. So
very cool. Congratulations.
Thank you.
It's a special place. I love Salem State. So now, so you got on state police, you're back in Massachusetts. Something I always found interesting about state police is that you could be from, say, Revere, but you could be stationed way out in Western Mass or any barrack in the Commonwealth. So talk to me about, where your first assignment was and how you came back to Revere.
As you said, being on the state police, it's different from being on another agency. A friend of mine is a Cambridge firefighter, and he and I talked about that one day. And I said, well, if your chief gets upset with you, you go to the other side of Cambridge. I go to the Berkshires.
Yeah.
When I first got on the state police in 1992, 7 of us from my class were assigned. We were all from the North Shore.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was Winthrop, Stoneham, Everett, and East Boston. And we were all shipped to the South Shore.
Oh, wow.
So I spent my first 8 years in uniform working out of the Norwell barracks.
Okay.
And it's funny that people are geographical. This is my life experience. Having been raised on the North Shore, when I told people I worked in Norwell, I got the blank stare, and people would ask, where's Norwell?
Like Connecticut, right?
Well, no, they thought it was the Cape. I said, well, if you go to the split down in Braintree, stay to the left, about 30 miles down, it's Norwell. And the reaction was always, you work on the Cape? And I'd laugh and say, no, 35 miles north of the canal, that's not the Cape. But to everybody on the North Shore, if you're south of Quincy, you're on the Cape.
Yep.
But to prove that it's not just North Shore people, I had a Christmas party at my house within my first few years on the job, and I invited everybody from the barracks. I said, well, where do you live? I said, Saugus. And well, where's that? So go through Boston, go by the old Boston Garden, go over the Tobin, and I had a couple senior guys look at me and say, kid, didn't they tell you you can't live there? And I said, what do you mean I can't live there? I said, if you're a trooper, you have to live in Massachusetts. I said, it is Massachusetts. Gosh. I said, no, everything north of the Tobin is New Hampshire, to somebody from the South Shore.
That's funny.
So, and I did notice that both the North Shore and the South Shore, I think everything west of Framingham is Western Mass.
Absolutely.
So people are definitely geographical or regional.
It's so funny. I have experienced a similar experience in the State House. So I lived here my whole life, and it was like anything outside of 128 is Western Mass. And I have friends in Worcester that are very quick to say, no, this is their Central Mass, there's North Central Mass, and anything, again, south of Quincy is the Cape to me as well. So
yeah, so it's the longer I'm on the state police, the smaller the Commonwealth gets to me.
Yeah, that's so funny. So now you ended up in the South Shore, you came back to Revere, and we're so happy that you're back here.
Thank you.
But I think something that I find really unique about your career and having the opportunity to kind of follow you is some of the experiences that you've had as a state trooper that I think are really cool. So can you talk to me about some of those kind of special tasks that you've got to do throughout your career?
Absolutely. I'm very fortunate. As I said, this is something I've wanted to do my whole life, but just like you, I didn't know everything that I wanted to do. I knew I wanted to be a trooper, and all I knew growing up was this uniform. But there are so many different opportunities. And while I was working on the South Shore, when I got on the state police, I was a licensed paramedic or a certified paramedic. And they said, oh, you're a paramedic. We need people to teach out at the academy. So I'd go out a couple of times a week for in-service training to teach CPR and first responder, because all police officers have to maintain a certification. And so I became an instructor, and I teach out there a couple of days a week. And then the state police started up a tactical medical unit. And the whole concept was, when we send our individual units out, we want to have medical personnel. It's nice we have fire departments and EMTs that are trained to do it, but in certain situations, you can't bring a firefighter or an EMT into a situation. Yeah. So we would have tactical medics that would go out with our stop team. When JFK Jr.'s plane went down, you're probably too young to remember that, but when that happened, I was the medic assigned, myself and Sean O'Neill were the 2 medics assigned to the dive team. Wow. So for 4 days, I spent, I was off of Martha's Vineyard on a boat, just making sure every morning the divers were healthy when they went out. I think we had 1 blown air drum was the only thing we had to treat. But that got me into that. And while doing medical stuff, I was approached by a trooper who said, hey, have you ever thought about doing fire investigation? And I didn't. I thought about being a police officer. I never thought about fire investigation. I said, oh, I think you'd like it. You should give it a try. And a month or 2 later, he called. He said, hey, there's a class going on out at the fire academy, basic fire investigation. We have slots. Would you be interested in going? Absolutely. And by that time, I had finished up my 8 years in Norwell. I had transferred here to the Revere Barracks. And so I got to go to this training course. It was a week long. And shortly after I finished the course, there were 2 openings in the units. So I interviewed for it and was very fortunate. And that led to probably the largest chunk of my career to date. In March of 2000, I became a fire and explosion investigator.
Oh, wow.
And it was a fantastic experience. And I stayed there. I figured I'd try it for a few years and move on to something else. And 19 years later, I was still there. But during that amount of time, I not only got to do fires and explosions as an investigator, we're the investigative wing of our bomb squad as well. So that's why it's a fire and explosion investigator. But in addition, when I first came in, they said, hey kid, you like dogs, right? And in my opinion, who doesn't? But
I'm a big dog person.
I knew I liked you. And evidently there are some people that aren't. But but I was asked to handle an accelerant detection canine.
Oh, wow.
So as I was training to be a fire investigator, which it takes years and years, and after having done it for 19 years, there's still so much more I needed to learn. But I was learning the basics, and I was also training with an accelerant detection canine, and they're specially trained dogs that we use them at fire scenes to detect ignitable liquids or accelerants. Like the most basic is gasoline, but really anything that's liquid that can be used to accelerate a fire. Charcoal, lighter fluid. Not that I'm giving anybody ideas, but there's a whole host of.
Of course.
Well, here's my public service announcement. If you are an arsonist and you are listening, we will catch you. But the dogs are trained on. I think we had 20 different odors that we trained on. And so that actually got me more exposure because I was doing this fire and explosion investigation where I was the lead case officer. But then on my days when I wasn't on call as an investigator, other investigators would call me and say, hey, can you come out with a dog and help out at the scene? So over the course of almost 20 years, I think I was probably at 1,500 fires or more.
Wow.
It was a lot of long days and nights, but I developed such an expertise in it, and it was really a fun field. I got to know people from, we were the blue side of the house. I got to know the red side of the house, and I really enjoyed my time. And the dog was great because, as you know, if you have a dog in the car when you're driving, you're not talking to yourself, you're talking to your dog. So I look slightly less crazy.
Oh, that's funny. So I'm going to be honest with you. I learned something new today. I did not realize that there was a fire service side of law enforcement. So that was something that I'd never heard of. And I think, like I'm sure a lot of people, when you see a canine, you assume narcotics, right? You assume that they're there to train or just to look for drugs. Or now we have new therapy dogs that are there for comfort. But I had never heard of a dog that was specifically trained to investigate fires and arson. So, and I didn't know that was your background. So that's pretty interesting.
I was very fortunate. I actually got to do it twice. My first partner, Tubbs, he and I worked together from 2001. He had a medical condition, so we had to retire at the end of, I want to say it was 2007. He worked about 6.5 years, and he retired due to a medical condition. But then once he retired, he came to live with my family and I, and lived
awesome.
out. He lived a nice retirement. Unfortunately, passed away in my arms on January 3rd of 2012. And then I got another partner. I've been very fortunate. I enjoyed fire investigation, and as a trooper, I worked with. When I came on the team, we had a sergeant and 8 troopers, and we covered all of Essex County, most of Middlesex County, and all of Suffolk County.
Wow.
Pretty big area. Now Boston does their own thing. But we would assist Boston, and at the time when I first started, Boston didn't have a canine, so if they ever needed an accelerant canine, it was me. I would go in and help out, or one of the other canines on our team. But for a while, I was the only canine team, myself and Tubbs. So we covered a big area with a lot of us. And over the years, like everything, budgets go down, numbers go down. And in 2012, when I was promoted to sergeant, I was in school working on my master's. Tubbs had retired, but there were only 5 of us on the team, a sergeant and 4 troopers. And when I was promoted to sergeant, our current sergeant moved on, and they said, well, you're the new sergeant of the team. I said, oh, fantastic. And they said, then I said, well, who are we getting to replace my spot? They said, well, you're staying in the unit. We're not replacing your spot. No, but I'm replacing the sergeant. They said, yes, you are. So needless to say, we dropped to a sergeant and 3 troopers to do what a sergeant and 8 used to do. And it was very busy, and then shortly thereafter, I was promoted. I stayed in the unit and was asked how about handling a dog? Would you like to do that too? That's why I've done that before. And they said, that's why we're asking you. So I got to work with my I say my current partner, my next partner, Maya, and she's an absolute sweetheart. She and I worked together from, I think we were certified 2013. So they called me and said, hey, do you want to work with a dog? And as I told you earlier, I went back to work for my went to school for my master's.
Yep.
And I said, I don't have time. We're a sergeant. I'm a sergeant. I have 3 troopers working with me.
It's a lot of responsibility.
I'm working on my master's. Can I at least wait till I'm done with my master's? They said, okay, let us know. And then I got a call in July of 2013. How are you doing? I said, well, I'm on my last class. I just have to pass the comprehensive boards. If I do that, then we'll talk about it. And then I got a call 2 weeks later. So how'd you do on the board? And I said, I passed my comprehensive boards. My last class is, I think, is August 18th. I'll come out to our headquarters on after I finish. I'd like to take a little break, and then we'll talk about it. Well, 2 days after my last class, I took a few days off. My family and I went away to New Hampshire. And while I was in New Hampshire, I got a text saying, congratulations, meet Maya. So evidently the decision was made, but I don't regret it. She's an absolute sweetheart. She and I began training the following week and were certified later in the year. And she worked with me right up until the day I retired. Now, fortunately, as I said, I'm a dog person. Shortly after I was promoted to sergeant, there was the opportunity to take the lieutenant's promotional exam. And I had just given a commitment to work with Maya for a few years. So I bypassed it. 3 years later, the opportunity came up again. And I once again said, well, no, I gave a 5-year commitment with a dog, and she's still so young. I don't want her to retire right now, and I definitely don't want to be promoted and lose her. So I bypassed the exam again. The third time the exam came around, I decided it's time to take the promotional exam, and hopefully I'm not going to be number 1 on the exam. I'd like to think I'm smarter than I am, but I know I'm not. So I took the exam, and when I did get promoted, Maya and I had already been working together for I think just over 6 years. Wow. And they said, well, she's young enough that she could be reassigned to somebody, because the dogs will usually work till 10. But you wanted your commitment. You're being promoted, so we'll let her retire. And she lives with me and my family to this day.
That's really cool. So I think it's really important and relevant to talk about that relationship. And I don't think people realize that when you're making those important life decisions for your career, that dog is your partner, right? And they're just as important as another officer that you work with. And I know at the state level, we just passed Nero's Law. And that was one of the first big pieces of legislation that came through when I got elected. And I don't think anyone can appreciate that more than you as someone that serves with these dogs. Because as a dog lover, I know the bond I have with my dog, right? I have full conversations with him. He's my sidekick. But your dog is so much more. I mean, you're depending on them in critical situations. They're responding to incidents where they're trained to protect you. And I think that the fact now that they get that same dignity and treatment and care as the services that they provide, it's so important.
Well, that's just I would tell people all the time, I spent more time with Maya than I did with any other living creature, my wife and children included. And I love my wife and my children. Yeah. But Maya came to work with me every day. She came home every night. Every summer, my children are now young adults, but even this summer we already have it planned for a weekend in August. I go camping. I've been going camping with my kids every summer. And Maya always comes with me. My wife wouldn't, but Maya would. And while we were there, little something I didn't mention earlier, when training with the Accelerant canines, all of our Accelerant and Bomb canines are food reward dogs. So they only eat when they work. When they find what they're looking for, they get fed.
Oh, wow.
So that means every day, if I'm not at a fire scene, I had to put out drops of ignitable liquid. She'd find them and she'd get a handful of kibble at a time. It takes an hour to 2 hours every single day.
So that's how she plays.
That's how she plays. That's how she gets rewarded. And it's when I could do a whole show on the dogs.
No, that's really cool.
And, but because of that, when I go camping, I'd take her with me, and would be doing things. And then, all right, kids, go off, go kayaking, do whatever. I had to spend a little time training Maya. So. To your point about Nero's Law and about the bond between handlers and their dogs, I spent more time with her than any other living creature. In 2014, the North team, the team that I was on for so many years, had more fatal fires than we'd ever had before. And as a supervisor at the time, I went to every fatal, well, all but 3. I think I was out of state for 2 of them. But I went to every one of them. And one of the things that we actually got involved in, it was a plane crash at Hanscom Air Force Base, small aircraft. And the troopers from Hanscom called and they said, listen, we have 7 dead in a plane. You work fatal fires. What's the proper way to go about recovering a body? What gear do you use? How do you go about it? And I walked them through it and over the phone. They said, oh, thanks very much. 10 minutes later, the phone rang and they said, hey, can you come out to Hanscom and recover? So myself and Trooper Cheryl O'Donnell, who was probably my longest serving colleague on the team and close friend, she and I went out there and did that. And at the end of that year, I had been hands-on at the fire scenes investigating. And when we recover the body, we'd have to do it in stages, document everything, and then we'd physically put the body in the body bag and remove it from the scene. So I was hands-on with more than 20 bodies just in that 1 year. And the reason I bring this up is because Maya is a highly trained accelerant detection canine, very good at what she does. One thing she never trained for, but she's wonderful at, is she's a great therapy dog. Oh. Our people will come by and check on us to see how we're doing mentally. Yeah. And when they come by and stop in at the office, hey, you've seen a lot, how you doing? I was doing fine, why? And they couldn't believe having seen as much as I did, but a lot of it had to do with, I would just sit and talk to Maya and vocalize what I was feeling, and she was really a great therapy dog without ever realizing it. So the bond is so great, and that's only from this perspective of an accelerant canine handler. Now, if you talk about our regular canine unit, which I've never handled a Shepherd or a Malinois, the dogs that do patrol, I would have to imagine those dogs and those handlers have an even tighter bond because Maya and I work together, find ignitable liquid, and she goes back. The patrol dog handlers, they're in crowds and they're counting on that dog to save their life, and they're tracking people in the woods and they're counting on that dog to be. You talk about Nero. Nero went in and unfortunately he couldn't necessarily save Officer Gannon's life, but he was in a position where it wasn't safe for anybody to be in. So the bond between Officer Gannon and Nero, I can't imagine how much even tighter that was.
I can't either. Now, I didn't realize that. What breed is Maya and what breed was Tubbs? So they don't use the same type of dogs for...
No, so all of our bomb and accelerant canines, or at least on the state police, they're black, well, they're Labradors. Oh. And most of them, if not all of them, both of my partners, but pretty much all that I worked with the other teams, came from Guiding Eyes for the Blind.
Oh, wow.
So every one of them was raised, and when I used to do presentations, I'd tell people all about the backstory. They're raised to be a guide dog, and for one reason or another, they didn't make it in a guide dog program. So then we would evaluate them and determine, do they have what it takes to be a guide dog? For instance, to be not a guide dog, to be an accelerant canine. To be an accelerant canine, you can't be skittish, because I've been in fire scenes and the fire departments use water to put fires out. Sheetrock absorbs water, so as I'm working, ceilings would collapse behind me, and Tubbs and Maya would just be like, you hear that? And then they'd go back to what they were doing. You had a skittish dog, wouldn't work. And they have to have a good food drive, because as we talked about earlier, they work for food. So if you have a dog, there are some dogs, I've never had one, but there's some dogs you could put a bowl of food down and they eat it at their leisure. Not my dogs, no. And definitely not the work partners, because I've had other dogs that are not work partners, but my work partners, or all of our work partners, have to have a good food drive, so we evaluate them. But I always preface when telling the story that every one of our dogs came from Guiding Eyes for the Blind. Our dogs did not fail out of guide dog school, because we don't admit failure on the state police. Every one of them chose an alternative career path.
There we go.
So,
I think it's a positive way of looking at it.
Yes.
Well, so I've learned a lot about your background and how you got here. Now let's talk a little bit about Troop A. So I know growing up in Revere, Troop A is just, it's a part of Revere Beach. Those barracks have been there my entire life and for generations before that. It's one of the most beautiful buildings, I think, on the beach, a lot of history. But I don't think people realize how much you actually cover aside from Revere Beach. So can you tell us a little bit about what Troop A's responsibility is and what your responsibility is as the commander there?
Absolutely. So the Commonwealth itself, the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, from a state police perspective, is broken down geographically. Northeastern Mass, basically from Boston to New Hampshire and out to about the 495 belt, is what's considered A Troop.
Okay.
B Troop is extreme Western Mass. C Troop is Central Mass. D Troop is from south of Boston to the Cape and the Islands. And H Troop basically covers all of Metro Boston.
Okay.
And then people may or may not have heard of F Troop. They're the Logan Airport and the Port Authority is F Troop. So Revere, the barracks that you know and love, is considered A5. So geographically, I said northeastern Mass is A Troop. Well, in the troop, we have 6 different barracks.
Okay.
So A1 is the Andover barracks. They cover basically 93 from the border down to the Cloverleaf and Woburn.
Okay.
And they cover the upper end of Route 3 from Tingsboro, the New Hampshire border to like Tingsboro, and a section of 495. A2 is the Newberry barracks. They basically cover that part of A Troop that from Andover to the ocean, all down 95 down to Danvers. A3 is our Concord barracks. They cover basically from Concord out to the 495 belt, and the 495 belt down to I don't think they go quite down to the Mass Turnpike, but they cover that area. And then there's Medford is A4, and they're probably the most similar barracks within the troop to Revere. At Revere, we're A5, and then A6 is the Danvers barracks, and they cover the Danvers area, portions of 95, the 128 belt, Route 1 from Saugus up to Danvers. So those are the 6 barracks. In particular, A5, SP Revere, we cover probably the smallest out of any barracks in the state, all troops included. We're probably the smallest geographically speaking. Population-wise, as you know, it's a pretty
dense.
This is this is your district. You know well how dense we are. I think we only cover primarily 6 or 7 communities. We cover East Boston, Winthrop, Chelsea, Revere, Lynn, and Nahant.
Oh wow!
Now that being the case, we cover a little bit of Malden on Route 1 because a primary road is Route 1 from the Tobin Bridge up to Route 99. So we cover a little section in Malden. Route 107 goes through Revere and Lynn, but it also goes through Saugus. So we cover a portion of Saugus. And when Governor Baker was the governor, there was always a security detail at his house. Technically, Swampscott is covered by our Danvers barracks, but whenever there were problems there, we went. So we were the barracks that cover that. So geographically, it's a relatively small area, which I will say, having worked out of Norwell, it's very nice because in Norwell, if I had a problem working the midnight shift and I was on Route 3 in Duxbury, my nearest backup could be Duxbury PD, who's dealing with the domestic, so their 2 patrolmen that are working aren't coming to help because they have their own issues. Around here, when we call for backup, Revere, as you know, is fully staffed. Saugus is fully staffed. Chelsea is fully staffed. Lynn. We have these communities, and you can always get help when you need it, which is very nice.
And I think it's important too, because I really do believe, especially growing up, in this community, that there's so many great relationships between the departments in terms of mutual aid with police and fire. And I think, a lot of you grew up together and know each other just from growing up in the community. And a lot of you have served together for so many years that you've worked together on, whether it be an accident scene or at a big event like the Sandcastle Festival on the beach. So I think it's really great that we have those partnerships, especially with Revere PD and A5 that we do.
Well, and that's a great point. When I came here to Revere, I've been here a little over 2 years as a station commander, and at the time, and currently, Dave Callahan was the chief.
Yep.
When Dave Callahan was a detective and I was a trooper doing fire investigations, we worked several investigations together.
Oh, wow.
So the first time I ran into him, shortly after I got promoted, I was on my way in one morning in Brown Circle, which is right at the end of Broadway and Route 107. There's a gentleman walking around in the middle of the winter in a coat and no pants. And he's in the middle of the rotary. He's emotionally disturbed. And there was one Revere officer off with him as I was coming by, so I stopped. And by the end of the situation, there were about 7 or 8 of us there, and the person was taken and given the help that they needed. But Chief Callahan stopped by, and when we finally got the person settled, he came over, congratulated me, and we got to reminisce about old times. And that's when I realized, wow, not only do I know him, Chris Reddy, the chief in Lynn, did multiple arsones in Lynn with him. Terry Delahanty, the chief in Winthrop,
Yep.
was my workout partner for a while in the gym. So
Oh, wow.
all of these people I actually have this personal connection with. It made my transition as a station commander here very easy. And it just makes working together so much easier because on a whole, police officers get along with each other. We all understand there may be some bickering back and forth, but we all have the same job to do. But on a handful of times when situations do arise, it's easy for me to call Chief Callahan or any of the other chiefs or the sergeants. Because I've worked with them, we've been around so long, we have so much in common. It makes the job a lot easier.
That's great.
And my experience as a fire investigator, I know most of the fire chiefs in the area as well because, again, a lot of them were investigators at some point in their career. I'd worked with them. So my transition into this current job has really been easy.
Well, I always found it interesting, the relationship between police officers and firefighters. You know, growing up in my house, my uncle was in the fire department, my grandfather was in the fire department, and my dad being on the police department. So my dad would always say, you know, firefighters need heroes too, and that's why we have police officers. But so I think, you know, we covered so much, and I know you talked about a lot of the really difficult situations that you handle. You know, when you go out to calls, you're responding often to someone's worst day and worst situation that they could be in. But I also think that you've got to respond to a lot of positive situations. So tell me about your favorite part of your job.
The favorite part of it's so hard to say because when I don't know if you're aware of this, but I used to be a bagpiper, and I started taking lessons when I was on the state police. And I'd show up at my bagpipe instructor's house, and at the time, I think I had about, I don't know, 5 or 6 years on the state police, and he'd say to me, part of my attempt at a Scottish brogue here, but Donald, how are you today? And I always say, Ian, every day that I get to wake up and put on the boots and breeches is a good day. And I truly meant that. And so my favorite part of my job is just my job. I love going into the barracks every morning and talking to the men and women that I work with. I'm a supervisor, I'm a manager, but one term I don't use is I don't call people my subordinates. Now, from a technical standpoint, the troopers at work at Revere my subordinates? Yes, because I'm their boss, but I don't consider them subordinate. They're my peers, they're my colleagues, they're my friends. So I enjoy going in and talking to the mid-shift troopers before they leave. Hey, how did things go last night? Anything good happen? Anything interesting happen? And I can promise you that, especially in the summertime, a lot of interesting happens overnight at Revere Beach. But I enjoy that aspect of it. I enjoy listening to the radio as I'm going about my day. Unfortunately, as a lieutenant, I have a lot more administrative tasks than hands-on. But I love listening to the radio. What's going on out there? What are the troops up to? And going out and getting involved. I'm very much a hands-on boss. So I like that aspect. I like going out and getting involved. When the sandcastles are in town in the summer, I don't want to be in our command center. I want to be out there on the beach. I want to be talking to the people.
I see you out there.
Yes. I don't want to be inside doing things, and I know that's a portion of my job, but I want to be out there talking to the people. It's one of those ugly things we don't like to talk about is we had it happen a couple times at Revere Beach, usually at the beginning of the summer, and it happens pretty much everywhere in the world. But there are times when the public or where instances go bad. And last summer or last spring, just before Memorial Day, we had very large crowds at the beach. I got a call. It was a Saturday. I got a call at home, and I couldn't imagine not being down there. I wasn't going to say, well, do this, do that. I got in uniform and I came down. But part of that was because I wanted to be there for my I know that my troops need leadership. They can do the job without me. I'd be a fool to think they couldn't. But I want to be there to let them know that they have support from me and let them know that whatever they have to do, I'm willing to do with them. But also, I wanted the general public to see I'm not coming down here, and we're not coming down here to put on helmets and swing bats. We're coming down here to try to restore peace and restore order, because you have as much right to be at the beach with your family as the people who are creating disorder. And we didn't want, the goal has never been, let's throw everybody off the beach.
Of course.
I don't want to build sandcastles by myself, but I want people to have fun and respect other people, and I want everybody to enjoy the beach. So getting down there and getting involved in that it's not necessarily my idea of fun, but in some senses, it is my idea of what I'm supposed to do. And I enjoy that. And I enjoy when I look at my colleagues at the end of the day that they know that, no, you're there with us. You're one of us. I've been very fortunate to be in the position that I'm in. I've watched a handful of people that when I got to Revere, it was I can't even say it was post-COVID because we were still, we were winding down, but there was still so much affected by COVID. And there were a handful of things between the vaccines and shutdowns that soured a lot of people. And there were a handful of other things that had gone on in the state police. So some of the troops that worked there weren't as engaged as I'd like them to be, but I understood why they weren't. And in the 2+ years that I've been there, I've seen such a change in the personnel. I can tell you there isn't any place I'd rather work than at Revere. I've got a great team there. And so my favorite part of the job is knowing that I've built, I don't refer to the barracks as a place to work. I refer to it as the A5 family. And that's how every email that I send out, every text that I send out to the troops is basically, we are the A5 family.
I think that's so important. And I think especially at where law enforcement is right now, to have that morale and to support your team the way that you do is so important, because I think that there are a lot of communities, and Revere is lucky, right? We have a super supportive community in the city of Revere that is always there for each other, right? But I think that that morale is not really there everywhere. So I'm so grateful that we do have that morale and support in the city of Revere. So I guess on that note, since this is such a different time in law enforcement than when you got involved, what advice would you have for someone that might be just getting out of college and sitting where you were in Florida, looking at this career and saying, you know, do I want to be a state trooper? Do I want to be a police officer? What advice would you give them?
It's a changing field. I think you said that beautifully, that it's a changing time. It's the field isn't the field that your father and I got into 30 years ago. And law enforcement has a little bit of catching up to do. Unfortunately, times progress, and we have to change as well. Not all change is bad. Unfortunately, there's a saying that there's only two things that police officers don't like: change and the way things are. Police officers don't like to change, but we do recognize that we have to, and I think we've done a good job of adapting with the times. Sometimes we can be our own worst enemy, and sometimes a whole other topic that I won't get off on, but sometimes we're painted in a bad light. I think what everybody, both police officers and people that are looking at police officers, need to recognize is that there's always a different perspective. You can't paint everybody with a broad brush. And I know, despite some of the bad things that you've seen on the news, I will never try to justify a lot of what's happened and a lot of what you see. But to judge all of law enforcement by a handful is no better than a police officer saying, well, you're a Jones and all the Jones boys are bad, so therefore you're bad. When I went to a small Catholic elementary school, and my oldest brother, great guy, I actually look up to him a lot more than he realizes, but I don't tell him that. But he was somewhat of the black sheep. And when he was in 6th grade, he and a buddy of his brought a mouse to school and put it in the nun's desk.
Oh, boy.
Yeah, Mrs. Bossi was not proud of that moment. And she had to go over and get the mouse. So when my middle brother, Stephen, came along, he paid for the sins of my oldest brother. And he was the quietest, and still is the quietest, nicest kid you'll ever meet. He doesn't bother anybody. And he would never do anything wrong. But he paid for my brother's sin. Well, they realized after the fact that, you know what, maybe we shouldn't be judging Stephen by what Michael did. And so they made effort with me, and unfortunately I was a little bit more like Michael and Stephen. But my point is that you can't judge Stephen by Michael and Donald. It's just not right. And so when people see that you're part of this family, or you live in this neighborhood, or whatever the factor is, and I think police officers have gotten a lot better about it than people realize, we don't judge. Now, that being the case, I was told as a young kid by my mother, you're judged by the company you keep, and you're judged by the actions of the people you're around. So if I'm taking a different tone with you, it's not because I'm judging you by the clothing that you're wearing, or I'm judging you by the color of your skin or your ethnicity. No, I'm judging you by the fact that you're treating me disrespectfully. I'm judging you by the fact that that person over there said you were just doing X, Y, and Z. It has nothing to do with those other factors. So yeah, I may be judging you harshly, but the reason isn't because of those other factors. It's because of what you've done to cause me to judge you that way. And I think respect on both parts
Absolutely.
will go a long way. One note, if I could say this, I agree with everybody's opinion and everybody's right to challenge authority. That's what this country was founded on. A few colonists one day said, hey, we're going to challenge the king, and here we are now, our own free nation. But there's a time and a place for challenging things. I can promise you this. If I pull Jessica Giannino over, and on the side of the road you decide to lecture me and tell me your rights, that's not getting you out of a ticket. Or if I say, I have probable cause to arrest you now, Jessica, please put your hands behind your back. Any argument you give isn't going to get you out of the arrest. Now, if I'm wrong, which hopefully I'm not, but if I am, the courts are going to prove that wrong, and it'll play out properly. But to fight with somebody on the side of the road, that's never going to be good for anybody. And I'm not trying to say, oh, we exercise complete authority and power. Also, I'm saying things go more smoothly when you challenge things in the appropriate way and at the appropriate time.
And respect each other. I think it all goes down to the bottom line of respect, that we all respect each other as people, right? At the end of the day, you go home to your family and live your life, and you're Don Bossi when you take the uniform off, and you are when you put it back on, but it's having people treat you with that same respect regardless. And I think something I learned growing up is there's not a person in this world that hates a bad police officer more than a good police officer. And I think that's something that we see all the time. But I think it's challenging because I think that so many people in this new generation are hesitant to get involved in law enforcement because the profession has evolved. And it's not what it was 20 years ago in terms of something admirable in a sense of, and I don't mean that in a negative way, but I know like when I was growing up, I was always so proud that my dad was a police officer. And I want the next generation to have that same pride. And I feel like we're working so hard to show that and to keep that integrity. But I think that there is something that we need to show the next generation, that this is a career that is still full of integrity, that is growing, that is evolving, and that we want the next generation to be a part of.
And integrity is a huge part of it. Law enforcement is built on integrity. I've never been so offended as one day when I was on a stand on a homicide trial. The defense didn't have much of a case to go on. And he started attacking my integrity. And the line of questioning was something along the lines of, well, the Boston police officers, it was a case that I was involved in with Tubbs, and all I did was collect the evidence and do the fire scene investigation. But the rest of the homicide investigation wasn't done by me. And I got to know the Boston detectives just during the course of the trial. We didn't have a whole lot of interaction prior to that. And the defense attorney asked me, well, you've become friends with these officers, and don't you want to see your friends succeed? And if you could do something to help them, wouldn't you? And I was so offended as I sat there on the stand thinking, you're attacking my integrity. I've spent my entire life, my entire career building my integrity. And it would be one thing if you caught me in several lies and you could question my integrity, but I testified in my entire career has been nothing but telling the truth. So please don't attack my integrity. You want to attack something, did I collect the evidence wrong? Which I didn't. But if I did, go after that. Go after Tubbs and I, our training. For my integrity, and I think it was a desperate attempt by an attorney. The jury saw through it. The gentleman was convicted and sentenced to life. But that was the most, to me, that was the most appalling thing that you could do, is attack my integrity, because that being said, I understand that people question the integrity based on some recent events, nationally and locally. So for anybody, and I apologize that I took this train way off track, but to your earlier question about getting people involved in recruiting, I would say the first thing is don't look at television shows because law enforcement is not at all like that. I've recently had to apologize to my recent, I currently have an intern working at the barracks with us, and I have her doing so much administrative stuff because unfortunately, that is a good portion of law enforcement. We don't kick down doors and defuse bombs, and we do that stuff about 0.5% of the time.
Which is good.
Yes.
We don't want those things
Right.
happening in the community, so that's good.
No, law enforcement is more about community relations. So if you're somebody who can problem solve, if you're somebody who has empathy, those are the people we want. We want people that are smart, people that can be firm, that'll stand up for their resolve, because you're going to be challenged a lot as a law enforcement officer. What we don't want is people that I'm always right and you're going to have to bend to my way, and I want to be a police officer because I want people to respect me. The one thing that I've learned, not only as a trooper, in more recent years as both a sergeant and now a lieutenant, is that you can give me a gold bar or stripes on my shoulders. That's just a position of authority. If you want leadership, which is what you want, you have to earn that. And so you can go through any academy you want, a local academy, state police academy, FBI academy, go to any academy you want. You can be raised to any rank that you want. But if you haven't earned respect, if you don't have integrity, and you haven't done the right thing, people will listen to you because they have to, and they'll only do what they have to do. So whether you're a commander on a police department or a police officer talking to a civilian, you want them to listen to you because they believe in what you're saying, or because they respect and appreciate that you're telling them this for the right reason. I'm not telling you to get off the beach because I want to show you that I can throw you off the beach. I'm telling you to get off the beach because there's a storm moving in, or because there's a Sharknado, whatever it may be. There's a reason I'm doing it. So if you're going to be a police officer because you want people to listen to you and that's all you want, you're not in it for the right reason. But if you want to help people, and as corny as it sounds, I try to get away from saying it because people think, I get the eye roll. I love helping people. That's why I do this job. I do this job because I can make a difference in this world. My children are now young adults, and I'd like to think I've made the world a better place for them. I used to joke with them every day going out the door and say, hey, Dad, you off to work? I'd say, yep, I'm going to root out evil where it lurks, drag it kicking and screaming into the light of day for all to see. Or I may just type a report. But it's a lot more report typing, but I do like to think that I've made a difference in my 30-plus years, and that the difference is not only have I arrested bad guys, but I've helped people that have needed help.
Yeah.
And that's what we're there for.
And I think it's some of those stories that you don't see that are sometimes the most important part of our jobs. And I think one of the reasons why you and I got along so well when we first met is we both have that same common feeling of wanting to help people. And I think when you watch the news and you read articles and you see things on social media, you see 5% of our job. What you don't see is the other 95% of the calls that you field and the people that you help in those quiet moments that aren't meant for the news. They're not meant for social media. They're a moment where you're truly helping someone or truly working in the community. And going on that note, talking about helping people in public safety, thank you so much for taking the time to answer all my questions. I'm going to give this opportunity to you to talk to our viewers about any public safety tips you have for Revere Beach. If there's any messaging you want to get out, or just general information or concerns, things that you see, anything you want to share with us.
Absolutely. So the beach, as you know, you've been here your whole life in Revere. The beach is a unique place. We have our share of issues that a lot of other departments and even a lot of other barracks don't have. The beach itself is a DCR property, so one thing that we have to do is we have to not only have to enforce Revere bylaws and Commonwealth general laws, there are also DCR rules and regulations. One of the biggest things that I don't think people realize, it goes definitely for the beach, but just in general, I'd like to address this. Marijuana usage in possession is now legal in certain quantities. That being the case, it's not, you can't just walk around smoking a joint, smoking a pipe. People think you can. We actually had an incident over the summer where we were trying to get help to a homeless person who was living on the beach, but we had to remove her from the beach so the DCR could do their thing, and somebody decided to sit there and watch to make sure we were doing the right thing, which that's why we wear body cameras, and the general public has a right to record us. We don't have an issue with that. But whether he thought he was going to catch us doing something wrong or was just observing, I don't know. But as we were walking away from the beach, we stopped, and one of the young troopers with me said, please tell me you're not just smoking a joint. And his response was, why, what's wrong with that? It's perfectly legal. No, it's not. In the privacy of your home, smoking marijuana is legal. But in a car, on the beach in public, it's not legal. So I try to tell people that I understand that it's been legalized, but not for use everywhere.
So would you say to consider it like an open container, the same way you wouldn't crack a beer and walk down Revere Beach, you would handle it the same?
That is exactly it.
Okay.
The same law that covers, if you're, alcohol is legal. I can sit home, have a couple of beers, perfectly fine. But I can't just, even if it's my first one of the day, I can't wake up, jump in my car, pop a beer, and go driving along drinking my beer. It's an open container. The same is true with marijuana. If you're smoking marijuana out in public or while you're driving or you're in a vehicle, it is treated the same way as an open container. And also on the beach itself, all smoking material, whether it's a cigar, a pipe, a cigarette, there is no smoking on DCR properties. A lot of people don't. Yeah, a lot of people don't realize that. Now, if it's December and you're walking your dog at 5 in the morning and there's nobody on the beach, am I going to come running out of the barracks and tell you, hey, put that out? Probably not. I'd rather you don't do it, especially right in front of the barracks. But I understand. I've never been a smoker, but I understand people that do smoke. I don't judge people for that. But there's no smoking on. So that was the person that I talked about earlier, saying, well, not only is it not legal for you to be smoking marijuana in public, you're on DCR property. You can't really be smoking anything. And the same thing goes, as you just said, with open containers. Please don't come to Revere Beach and pop open your cooler and decide, hey, now's a good time for. I don't disagree. Having gone to school in Florida, I understand the value of a cold beer on a hot beach. However, it's not acceptable.
I think it's important to know the beach is for everyone, right? So the beach is not just for our young college kids, it's for families. It's a place where people take young children, and I think it's important for us to be mindful of our neighbors, that if I'm, in my 20s or 30s and I'm hanging out with some friends on the beach, that there might be a young family next to me with small children that you want to be respectful of as well.
Absolutely, and that's the message. When I went down to the beach last summer, that weekend where there was a little bit of disorder, at one point we made a decision we had to clear the beach. So I'm telling kids, listen, I understand it's not the loud music I have the problem with. It's the large crowds. It's the fact that I've got a family over here with young children and they can't enjoy themselves on the beach. So we have to get everybody off the beach. And somebody's response was, well, are you throwing them off the beach? Well, so sadly, yes, I am. I'm closing the beach to everybody. I can't just close it to specific people. We're at a point where I have to treat everybody the same. Now, if you guys could just have calmed down and stopped acting like a mob, then you could all be enjoying it. And the following week, there was actually a thing on social media, oh, we're coming back, we're taking over the beach. Well, we were prepared for that weekend. The first weekend, we didn't see it coming, and we did what we could with limited resources. Well, the following weekend, we were a little bit more prepared. And one of the things that I did was I was actually out there with several people as people are coming off the trains, young kids, groups of 20, 30 people. And I go, hey, how you doing? Welcome to Revere Beach. What do you want? Nothing, just welcoming you to America's oldest public beach. You bothering me? No, enjoy yourself. Just be respectful. Have a fun day and enjoy yourself. And I don't know whether they thought I was crazy, whether they thought I was sarcastic, but truthfully, no, welcome to Revere Beach. It is America's oldest public beach. It's a public beach. It's here for all to use. We just want everybody to be able to enjoy it. Now, your idea of fun at the beach may be different from my idea of fun at the beach, but it doesn't mean we can't both have our own sets of fun without respecting each other.
And I think it's important to note, too, that utilizing the beach is very different than the roadway, right? That roadway needs to be open for public access so that fire trucks can get down, that ambulances can get down, that police cars can respond, because aside from enjoying the beach for public purposes, it's a residential beach. There are seniors that live on our beach that need medical access. There are situations that the fire department have to respond to very often down the beach. So it's important that we remain respectful of keeping our roadways open. And there's plenty of open space on the beach to utilize that don't block the roads. So if that was my PSA, I would definitely make that recommendation as well.
Well, I have to say, when it comes to large crowds, and to give you an idea of what I was talking about earlier, this year with the World Cup, Morocco went further than, what was it? They were the first African nation to make it to the Final Four or the Final Eight, which is so happy for all the citizens of Morocco and people of Moroccan descent. They swarmed to Revere Beach in great numbers after a couple of the victories. And I just happened to be working, so a few of the troopers and I went out there, because they were blocking the boulevard, and they were excited. They were waving flags and screaming. So we went over and talked to them. Okay, can you do us a favor? Can you push it onto the sidewalk? We need to keep traffic flowing on the boulevard. And a handful of the people going by, they're beeping and hanging out sunroofs and hanging out windows. I'm going, whoa, 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 whoa. Get in the car. It's not that I don't want you to celebrate. I don't want you to fall out and get hurt.
Yes.
I can't just let laws go by the wayside. For your own safety, please celebrate. Beep your horn all you want. Preferably do it on a beach side so you're not disturbing the citizens on Ocean Ave, but because we have to respect the law. But absolutely, and they were there for several hours, waving flags, celebrating, music going, having a ball in the middle of the day, not bothering anybody. And we stood by to make sure that nobody bothered them so they could have the fun they wanted because they were celebrating. So that's a big crowd, which some people might say was out of control. I don't think it was. They were having fun. So we encourage that on the beach. Come down and have fun. Do what you're doing. It could not have been more respectful to us, and we tried to return the same respect, and everybody won. So when I see things like that, I think, well, things can go well as long as there's respect on both sides.
I think that's so important. And I think if there was a theme to put a bow on this, I think that's it. It's respect, right? And I think we're so grateful for what you do and the respect that you have, not only for the officers that work under you and beside you, but for our community. And I'm so grateful for that. And I'm so grateful that you took the time to join me today. I know this is not a typical day in your office, but I'm so glad that you're here and that you took the time to talk to us and for the community to get to know you a little bit better, because I think a lot of times when people interact with our state police, it might be quickly in passing or it might be in the middle of a critical incident. But I think it's really nice just to get to know who you are and to have the community know a little bit more about you. So if anyone needs to reach out or has any other follow-up questions, is there a website or a place that has information about the barracks?
So with the barracks, we don't have our own website. I know the state police does. Anybody, when you're down the beach, you're welcome to stop in and say hi. And if you see any of our troopers, now I'll preface this with, if they happen to be on a motor vehicle stop or interacting with somebody, maybe wait till they're done with that. But the troopers at the beach, we really have a great group of people. So feel free to stop and say hi and talk to any of us. It's one of the unique things being at Rivera's. I actually know more people. You, as a politician, understand what constituents are. You get out and you get to know most police officers don't. In local departments, they may have, oh yeah, we're going to this house again. It's so-and-so for this call. On the state police, we normally don't have that. Well, we do at Rivera. I know it. And that actually plays in well to the respecting we were talking about. We have a handful of people that are down the beach yearly. And some of them are homeless, some of them are emotionally disturbed. But we know them all by name, and we've developed a good enough rapport. So we don't just go in going, get in the ambulance. We go over, we talk to people. And frequently we resolve the everything we need to do because we get to know our people. So the more people we get to know, the better. If you live in the beach, if you frequent the beach often, say hi to us, get to know us. We really are a friendly group. Some of us more friendly than others. And for young people that are thinking about a career, I think the deadline just passed for the most recent exam.
I believe it did.
But if I may plug the state police here, the state police have a cadet program that just started.
Oh.
And it's a way for young adults, I think and I should probably know more on this, but young adults from I think 18 or 19 to 23, 25, somewhere in that area, can apply to become a state police cadet. There's a thorough background done, and if you become a cadet on the state police, then when you take the civil service and the state police exam, if you pass and you've successfully completed or are in the process of successfully completing the cadet program, you actually get preference on getting into the next training class. It's a good way for us to get to know people and decide, will they make it? And it's also a good opportunity to get people that may not want to be police officers or may not know that they want to find out a little bit more about it and to find out a little bit about the state police. So I know the state police recruitment and diversity unit has a lot of information on that. If you go on the state police website and you look up recruiting, there's a lot of information on the cadet program, and that's a great way. We've never had a cadet program before, and I'm cautiously optimistic from what I've seen from the handful of cadets that we have so far. We don't have any at the barracks at Revere yet, but within the troop, I think there are 6 or 9.
That's great.
So we're hopefully building the future and building a brighter future for law enforcement and for everybody.
That's really great. And we'll get the links for those resources, and I'll be sure to share them on my social media, and we'll share them to this video so anyone watching can access that information. But Lieutenant, thank you for being here today.
Representative Giannino, Jessica, I can't thank you enough. It's a wonderful opportunity and always good to sit and talk with a friend.
Well, this has been another episode of View from the Hill. Thank you for joining us.